Welcome back. I'm Alfred Lambremont Weber, and we have the great privilege today coming to us from Bucharest, Rome. From Bucharest, Romania.
That's it.
I cut off the last part of the country, where he's just arrived from a 60-day hunger strike in Rome that ended on the 15th of June. Uh, Kevin Galalae. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you for having me on your show, Alfred. It's a privilege. We've meant to do this for a while now, but we have not succeeded. Now we have a chance.
Good, good. I just want to give a bit of background for our viewing audience who may not be completely familiar. And uh, Kevin is now engaged and has just completed a 60-day hunger strike to bring attention to the depopulation program and principally uh, to the WHO, the World Health Organization, which is a principal actor in the depopulation lobby, which has been using vaccine, drugs, endocrine disruptors, man-made pandemics uh, as in support of this depopulation uh, drive. And the purpose now, the immediate goal is to physically shut down the offices of the World Health Organization in Geneva. There's a legal term that has been assembled, and civil society infrastructure, and get its director general, Dr. Margaret Chan, who has been implementing this depopulation program out of there, and uh, stop and deconstruct this agenda. Um, so I wondered and would like to ask you if you could give us an overview of the depopulation agenda, where your drive to deconstruct this is, and in particular, you've come forth with 15 points that describe the depopulation agenda. And I wondered if you could introduce our viewing audience to those and sort of go through them so we have a scope of the problem and then exactly what you're doing and then how they can participate. I know that there's a GoFundMe drive. There are many different ways that people can participate in this. So over to you.
Yes. Well, first of all, let me just mention that in Rome, the 60-day hunger strike that I completed exactly a month ago to this day, I intended to do more than just bring attention to the depopulation agenda. This is already a done deal, really. I have succeeded to bring this onto the public's consciousness over the last 3 years. In Rome, I was there specifically to compel or force Pope Francis and his College of Cardinals to actually change the Church's stance with respect to contraceptives. Currently, the Church bans its use, the use of contraceptives, and because of this ban, they have forced, in a sense, secular governments to bypass the Church's wishes and to proceed through secret methods, covert methods of population control through chemical and biological means. Of course, the Church is fully aware of this because the Vatican has given secular authorities their tacit permission as early as 1953 to subvert fertility under the pretext of healing disease. So this was the ethical loophole that the Vatican has opened up for secular authorities to pursue population control in secret through covert chemical and biological methods. It appears that I have succeeded to bend the Church's will which is nothing short of a miracle, because on the 52nd day of my hunger strike, the church announced the formation of a new body, which is a conglomeration of many existing church bodies that will henceforth encourage people to engage in responsible procreation, to use their own words, and also to protect life from the beginning to the end, which can only mean two things. First, the use of contraceptives or birth control, artificial birth control, and secondly, disallowing or shutting down the chemical means that have been used by government since 1945 to control population growth, to subvert fertility, to be precise, and in so doing, they have damaged the entire human health. So the church now realizes that by its ban, it has been partially responsible for this outcome. Okay, so having succeeded now in removing this very, very structural obstacle, really, the church has acted in such a way as to prevent the legislation or the open pursuit of population control by empowering people to assume responsibility, to assume command and control over limiting their own fertility, and use the contraceptives of their choice in order to do so. So now the church realizes this, and it appears clear that it is cooperating with the secular authorities in the open rather than behind closed doors, so that they were pursuing population control at our cost. And now that's no longer possible. I shut down that kind of behavior at the international level. Now, my next action will happen at the end of this month, as you have mentioned, and it will take place in Geneva, Switzerland, where the World Health Organization is located. Well, the WHO, the World Health Organization, is of course the right arm of the depopulation lobby, if you allow me to call them that, because they have used the cover of medicine and public health to bypass the rule of law, and to subvert both the reproductive system and the immune system in order to control population growth at both ends of life. Birth, hence subverting the reproductive system, and death, hence weakening the immune system so as to increase morbidity and mortality when and as needed. Ultimately, the only way you can bring population to a halt or stabilize the population is by balancing life and death. And the target that they are looking for is 10 deaths and 10 births per 1,000 people. This is the one of the main targets that they are gunning for, that they're aiming, and that they have more or less reached in throughout the developed world. Another one of their major objectives is to, at this point, stabilize the population at maximum 10 billion by the middle of this century. Why 10 billion? Because 10 billion is considered to be the maximum number of people that the Earth can feed, that we can feed with the existing technology, with the existing yield per hectare. And of course, we have no new continents to discover and develop, so therefore we cannot expand, our food production, and we cannot increase the planet's resources. We only have one planet, and this is what we have to work with, and we are already exceeding the planet's natural resources. We are over-consuming. So they have engaged every method possible to control population growth covertly, both chemical and biological, which they aim at subverting the reproductive system and the immune system, as well as psychosocial, legal, and economic means, which are aimed at undermining the family structure and the social structure as well, so that families stay few and small. And they use a variety of methods to delay family formation, to delay entry into the workforce, to suppress wages so that people are unable to afford children and to afford a family until later in life, to very, very good effect, because they have managed to push the age of the first birth, which prior to the beginning of this program of population control, so prior to 1945, was in the early 20s, and even before then, people would have their first child. Well, now the first child comes in the early 30s. So they've managed to shave off 10 years off the reproductive years of a couple, the best 10 years, by the way, between the age of 20 and 30. So that is another one of their major objectives, to make sure the population peaks at 10 billion. Then they want the population to gradually decrease so that they will eventually reach optimal population levels. Yet again, another one of the major geopolitical objectives of the international system. Call it the New World Order, whatever you like. Why optimal population levels? Because at this point, with 7.4 billion people and the consumption levels that we have, we are in overshoot by about 50%. In other words, we consume about 50% more resources than the planet can regenerate. So we are eating into the resources of future generations and jeopardizing all life on Earth in so doing. Without bringing the population down to optimal population levels, to sustainable population levels, it will be impossible to bring human civilization back into harmony, into balance, into equilibrium with Mother Nature. And just to give you an idea of how vast a goal this is, for Europe and North America, virtually the entire developed world, the population would still have to go down by about half of what it is today. So take, the 500 million people that live in the European Union, that has to come down to about half in order for the European population to be sustainable. It's the same for the United States. Of the 330 million that live in the U.S. now, the land mass of the United States can only support about at most 200 million sustainably.
Are you saying that it is the premise of their plans that you need these low levels to be sustainable, or are you saying that objectively you need low levels to be sustainable? I'm a bit
both.
confused.
They are. This is a firm objective within the plan of the international order. They will accomplish this one way or another. And I'm saying, you cannot continue to pursue these objectives, which are an absolute necessity. They're dictated by the planet's limitations, by the finite resources available to us, by the state of Mother Nature as it is, by our extraordinary consumption levels and the dirty technology that we use, by our inability to even feed the existing population properly, because 2 billion of us are virtually starving, and so on. So
but sorry, there's a lot of argument that says that the reason why there's perceived overpopulation and a lack of resources and food and hunger is because we live in a planet where an overwhelming amount of resources are devoted toward destructive activities like war, and there's a growing gap between rich and poor. There's a concentration of wealth at the top, and that if resources were developed, say, along a permaculture model, that there is no limit to, there really is no limit to there are no limits to growth, and that I'm not sure if you're familiar with, this is kind of in the realm of conspiracy theory, the Georgia Guidestones, where they have this theory that the maximum population of the planet should be 500 million or half a billion, and that the Club of Rome or the Bilderbergers, that's their goal in the depopulation program. I'm kind of throwing things out at you, but I'm just a bit surprised to hear you say that there are absolute limits to population. I'm kind of tossing that football back to you.
Yeah, but there is no doubt that the way the wealth is shared nowadays, and not just wealth but also labor, is completely unfair and unsustainable. There is no doubt
Right.
that we could eliminate much of the poverty simply by redistributing the existing wealth.
Yeah.
There is no doubt that new and better agricultural technologies such as permaculture would allow us to have less of an impact on Mother Nature in the process of growing our food, while at the same time feeding more people. But the assertion that the planet can accommodate a limitless number of people is completely erroneous.
I see.
And I will explain why. If the population is not interfered with, if population growth is not interfered with, it doubles every 20 to 30 years, depending on culture and sexual habits and so on. Imagine we are now at 7 billion. Within 30 years is nothing historically speaking, the population will have doubled to 14 billion. So within the next 30 years, we would have to build the same number of cities and infrastructure and hospitals and schools and cars and on, and feed and clothe and educate as many people as we now have on the planet, as much infrastructure as we have built over the past 20,000 years, at a time in our history and at a time when the planet is already overstretched, when the damage that we have done to the planet's life support systems is already critical. So let's say we, by some miracle, we survive the next doubling to 14 billion by 2040. The next doubling would happen by 2070, and by then there would be 28 billion on planet Earth, and so on. And then by the end of this century, there'll be 56 billion. You can imagine, it doesn't matter what kind of technology we will have developed to produce, clean energy, how cleanly and effectively and efficiently we grow our food. It is just not possible to accommodate this kind of doubling of the population ad infinitum, to the end of time. Eventually, everything is going to come down to a major crash. And the longer we delay this process of stabilizing the population, which is a completely unnatural process, especially when it's done through covert chemical and biological means, the harder it is and the less likely it is that we will succeed. Why? Because to bring the global population to a stop, to a dead stop, to a state of stability, is a multi-generational process. Now I'm talking about our governments, because this is no conspiracy. This is policy. This is global policy, and I will explain in a few short minutes. Had they not started in 1945, it would have been already 20, 30 years too late. Already there would be on planet Earth at least 3, perhaps 4 extra billion people. So we would have already reached by the 1980s, 1990s at the latest, we have already reached what is considered to be the maximum or the peak population that we can feed, and not sustainably, completely unsustainably, but at least we can feed this number of people, for a period of time until the population starts decreasing to a sustainable level. So, horrible things have been done in the name of the depopulation program. They have prevented the birth of 2 to 2.5 billion children. Most of these children died, by the way, in their mother's wombs, and not because the moment of conception was prevented. So the current child mortality statistics are a complete fiction. These children have virtually been killed in their mothers' wombs for the sake of stabilizing the global population. Almost 500 million people have been killed prematurely. How? Because they're feeding us these endocrine disruptors, these depopulation poisons, as I have baptized them, through the basic elements of life: food, water, beverages, cosmetic products, dental products, and so on. The damage that has been done to human health and to the genetic and intellectual endowment of humanity is great and perhaps irreversible. More than this, this damage is cumulative. That is to say, it gets worse from generation to generation, because the damage done, this genetic, intellectual damage done to one generation, gets passed down to the next one. So from generation to generation, subjected to this program of covert chemical and biological poisoning, you have a degradation of the species. And it comes to a point where the vast majority of us will no longer be able to procreate. Most of us will be chronically ill and dysfunctional and so on. To date, by my calculations, about 300 million genetic lineages in the developed world have been shut down. That's 300 million. And of course, 50 to 60% of the population suffers from chronic illnesses. And here's another hammer. This program of covert population control that has been pursued since 1945 by covert chemical and biological means, that has done this degradation to our species that is cumulative, gets worse from generation to generation, is actually the cause of the so-called epidemiologic transition. So this so-called demographic transition, which is the euphemism the system has given the program of controlling population growth and bringing it down to sustainable levels, they call this the demographic transition. Very clean, technical, scientific term that so much hides behind it. As they have subverted fertility and the immune system over the past 50, 60, 70 years, depending on the country, they have caused this increase, this epidemic in so-called chronic or non-communicable diseases, the modern illnesses, cardiovascular diseases, cancers, obesity, diabetes, neurodevelopmental disorders, neurological disorders, and so on. The things like autism and attention deficit disorders in children, and on and on and on. All of the modern illnesses that were virtually non-existent before are the result, the direct result of the continuous and constant sublethal attack on the reproductive system and the immune systems for the sake of controlling population growth. This is something that is now accepted fact. I have published these papers within the publications of the medical community, and this is now clearly established scientific fact. If these methods continue, these covert methods continue, within the next 50 years, humanity will cease to exist. Those of us who are still, of our children who are still capable of reproduction, because keep in mind, my generation, I'm 50, 20 to 25%, so that's almost a quarter of the women in my generation are infertile. They're not capable of bearing a child. And 80% of the men have substandard sperm because of this continuous attack. The generation, the young generation, the 20-year-olds now who are just entering their reproductive years, the situation among their ranks is perhaps twice as bad. We don't yet have the statistics available. There are some statistics that are coming out, and it shows that in terms of fertility, these people are devastated. About half of them are infertile. Those lucky ones of this generation, the 20s generation, who will be lucky enough to and capable of having children, their children, only perhaps a quarter of them, or perhaps none of them, will be able to bear children, and so on. Not to mention what will happen to their health, to the state of their health. Chronic illness will be that much worse, another 2 generations from now. So clearly, the system cannot continue with these methods. Sooner or later, and I'm sure this was understood, from the very beginning, sooner or later, the human body is going to cave in. And sooner or later, these covert methods would have to be replaced by overt methods. That is to say, instead of poisoning people on the sly through the basic elements of life into infertility and shorter lifespans, you legislate limit to family size. And the limit that has to be legislated is obviously replacement level fertility. That is to say, 2 children per woman. So a couple, if every couple has 2 children, they just replace themselves. And the population remains stable. And this is something that sooner or later humanity will have to legislate. This will become global law. This will become an indisputable and immutable global law, I can guarantee you, within the next 2, 3, at most 5 years. And this will be the case until the end of time. Why? For the very simple fact that we do not have another planet to go to. And we cannot blow up this planet and make it bigger to increase the landmass. The only thing that increases is our consumption, our voracity, and the impact that we have as individuals on the planet. Because our modern lifestyles are 10, 20, 100 times more devastating, more costly to the natural environment than the lives, the agricultural lives, the agrarian lives of our forefathers. We as individuals today, each and every one of us living in the developed world, consume 100 times more resources than our forefathers. And we consume those resources for twice as long, because now life expectancy is 70, 80 years. Prior to that, it was a lot shorter. Life on average around the globe prior to around 1900 would have been 45, 50 at most. So you can see that that sooner or later we have to bite the bullet, and we have to legislate this. This will become part of human civilization as intrinsic and unquestionable as the fact that we all have to eat 3 meals a day.
Right. Just a couple of points. One, I just wanted to mention one factor which we have studied principally through a number of experts on the nuclear issue, and that is ionizing radiation from depleted uranium weapons, nuclear tests, and power plants such as Fukushima being a factor. Radiation in the environment, the atmosphere, the oceans, as being a factor in depopulation. Have you studied that impact as well?
Yes, there's no doubt about it. And I have a feeling, and more than a feeling, there are some indications that Fukushima was not entirely accidental,
Right.
but rather was helped along. And it makes sense because Japan, for instance, has refused to allow their country to be chem-sprayed, which is what most NATO countries have used since 1995 as the method by which to get rid or to speed up the death of the baby boom generation. You see, primarily chem spraying is a climate change mitigation method, but secondarily it is a method of increasing the presence of heavy metals and well-stocked materials in the environment in order to speed up the death of the baby boom generation. Why is that important? Well, because in the latter stages, the entire developed world is in the last stage of this demographic transition, this engineered population stabilization. You end up with inverted population pyramids. That is to say, too many old people at the top of the pyramid, over 25% of the population being 65 and over, and very few children at the bottom of the pyramid because fertility has been impaired for 60 years. And just not enough people, working adults in the middle of the pyramid, to sustain these crushing burdens. The burden of the old, and the burden of the young will no longer be a problem because there's very few young, and the young are nowhere near as costly as the old. So the onus at this stage of the demographic transition is to get rid of the old, so that you end up with stable population pyramids. Like this, bullet shape. Just enough old at the top here to be able to be supported by the working population, and enough young to be able to replace the old as they pass away and population stays stable. This is what they're gunning for. This is the population pyramid they want. We started from this. A lot of young people at the bottom, very few old people at the top, lots of working adults. But these population structures could no longer be supported because they keep growing. But the planet does not grow. The resources do not grow. So as they started interfering with fertility and reducing the number of children born, see, the bottom of the pyramid has become narrower and narrower and narrower and narrower and narrower. And over the last 7 years, we've ended up with this kind of population structures. Too many old people to be supported in old age by this dwindling number of workers. The ratio now of worker per dependent, whether it's a dependent old person or a dependent young person, is basically 1-to-1 throughout the West. It's completely unsustainable. This is why governments are in the red. This is why it does not matter how they switch money around. You know, they are in the red. They're in deficit. So they are doing everything possible to get rid of the wings of the pyramid. These wings of the old. They want the old to die faster. They cannot allow the old to live to 80, 90 years of age, which would be the natural length of a human life. Were we to live in a clean environment where we're not subject to all of these covert poisoning programs.
Now,
and they're
go ahead. Sorry.
They're getting rid of the old. You know, the death rates now among the old they've skyrocketed, increases of 10, 11, 12% throughout the West. They need to do that because now the dependency burden posed by the old is about 30%. It will be at 60% by 2050. A dependency burden of 60% by 2050 if nothing is done about it. So this is, you know, mass murder by any definition, but it is, you know, this horrible situation in our transition from these kind of population pyramids to this. They want to get us here, and this is the price that is being paid. For the past 60 years, the price was paid by the young. Children were being killed in their mother's wombs, 2.5 billion of them, right? Now the price is being paid by the old to get to these stable population structures. Within the next 20 to 30 years, they will get rid of 2 to 3 billion old people. And the chemtrail program is crucial to this. They do it through the weaponry of NATO. They use their planes, and they use their technology and their secrets and their funding to do this. And that's what where chemtrailing comes into place. Throughout the developing world, which, you know, all these countries are now basically where we were 30 years ago or 40 years ago. They're just beginning their demographic transition. They're in stage 2, perhaps stage 3. The onus is on still reducing fertility and keeping fertility very, 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 getting it down to replacement level, 2 children per woman or less. And that, of course, is not yet accomplished in many countries, especially sub-Saharan Africa, which is why the World Health Organization, now I'm getting to the World Health Organization, has initiated a so-called malaria eradication program this year, which comes, you know, after 10 years of previous efforts. And they're using this malaria eradication program, which applies to 2.3 billion people in 85 or 86 countries around the world, all of the developing world virtually, and even some developed countries that are slipping, that have slipped in their suppressing fertility, applies to all of these people. And they are using the cover of combating malaria and pursuing vector control. In other words, spraying mosquitoes and to kill mosquitoes so that they don't spread the disease. They're using these covers, the cover of combating malaria, is as the pretext under which to poison people into sterility and morbidity. 2.3 billion people. They're doing this with a variety of chemicals, with bed nets that are sprayed with these organophosphate chemicals that are basically the contraceptives of the developing world. Millions, billions of people now, over a billion people throughout the developing world, sleep under these bed nets sprayed with these organophosphate chemicals. And they inhale these chemicals. They touch them all the time. Children too, adults too. And they act as one of the fertility suppression methods. Then they spray malathion and other poisons throughout their homes and neighborhoods, so that this poison sticks to everything, presumably to kill mosquitoes, but of course at the same time to suppress fertility in humans. And they're using a drug called artemisinin, which was created by the Chinese in the 1960s to be a sterilizant, and they're using that as a pretext that it is a drug that kills malaria. Of course it isn't. It has absolutely no effect on malaria whatsoever, which is why it is used in combination therapy with a drug that actually does kill malaria.
Now, yes, go ahead. Sorry.
This is how desperate they are. Please.
Yeah, I just you mentioned two things. One is China, and I know that China's had, number one, the one-child policy in effect for a number of decades, and now they've gone to the two-child policy. And China they've been, I believe, at 1 billion, perhaps up to almost 2 billion. So could you talk about the effect of China in this scheme for a while?
China is a very good country to look at for many reasons. First of all, it has the largest population at over 1.3 billion now, and it will not peak until about 1.45 billion by 2030. So they're still growing for a few more years, and then it'll peak, and then it'll start decreasing. Secondly, they are the only country in the world that has legislated population control since 1978. And from 1978 until 2016, they've had a one-child policy for most people in the cities and for most people in rural areas too, except for those whose first child was a daughter, people in the countryside whose first child was a daughter, or the first child was handicapped in some way. And in those two exceptions, they allowed a second child. Now, having prevented the birth of 400 million Chinese and having stabilized their population, now they're allowing a two-children policy. In other words, replacement level fertility, so that the population will peak in another 10 to 15 years, and then it will remain stable where it is. Perhaps it will decrease, very, very slightly. However, the Chinese, they started 10 years earlier than 1978, and they did not legislate at first. They started during the days of Mao Zedong around 1967. And they used the same covert methods as the West. They've used endocrine disruptors, probably fluoride, in food and toothpaste and so on. And they succeeded in reducing fertility rates from 6 children to 3. Within 10 years, they reduced fertility rates through these chemical methods from 6 children to 3. And then in 1978, they introduced legislation which would have been easier to accept. Now they said, okay, from 3 children, we only allow 1. Had they gone from 6 children to 1, can you imagine? That would have been a huge gap. Besides, they didn't want to spoil the legacy of Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong did not allow that. And it's very telling that the program started in 1978, the one-child policy. It started the year Mao Zedong died, and somebody else took over the reign of the country. So Mao Zedong, did not want his legacy spoiled. The moment he died, they introduced the one-child policy, and they've stuck with that. And this is the only alternative, the only logical alternative, the only possible alternative, an acceptable alternative to covert chemical and biological means. Why has it been possible in China and not in the West? Well, for the very simple reason that China is a one-party state. You see, and in the West, legislating population control or pursuing population control through open methods has been impossible due to 3 structural obstacles. One being the democratic process. The second one, the intractability or the refusal of religious authorities to allow the use of contraceptives and abortion. And 3, in 1945, when the program was initiated, when combating population growth was the solution, the alternative to war that the new system embarked upon, the international community embarked upon, there were no contraceptives to speak of, and nobody could talk about sex and about contraception in public because that would have been considered obscene, and you would be immediately imprisoned for under the obscenity laws of the time, which lasted until the 70s, by the way. So these three structural obstacles stood in the way, and the church wouldn't move out of the way, wouldn't allow contraceptives, and of course the democratic process. Imagine you have several politicians vying for office, and they all promise the sky and the moon, as they always do, and the lone honest one says, well, if you elect me, I will limit your family size to 2 children only by law. Obviously, that guy or gal is never going to be elected to high office in a democracy. So they had to bypass these structural obstacles, and that's what they did. China did not have these two major structural obstacles. They did not have the intractability of the Catholic Church and other religious authorities, because China is a secular and virtually non-religious society. And they did not have the democratic process. They are a one-party state. The Communist Party decides something, and that's the law. That's it. They don't put it to a vote. And so you see the paradox here. The very assets of the Western world, democracy and our Christian faith, have stood in the way to pursuing population control the proper way, the decent way. Instead, we've hid our secular and religious authorities because they have been cooperating, closely on this. And the popes and our religious authorities are as guilty of genocide as our political leaders are and our scientific leaders are. This is truly a cooperation of all of the elites in the military establishment, the religious establishment, the scientific, and the political. They are all guilty of genocide, but they didn't, they really didn't have a choice. They had to bypass these structural obstacles. They did have a choice, however, to switch, to change course immediately, just as the Chinese did in 1978. We could have done this in 1991. Why? Because in 1991, the entire Eastern Bloc fell apart. And there was no longer that tension, the threat of nuclear annihilation between the East and the West, and the threat of mutually assured destruction had it come to a nuclear confrontation, to war. And now is a good time to mention some of the other points that I usually do in my 15-point presentation.
Sure.
Going back in history to why the international community, why our leaders decided in 1945, actually a little earlier, that population control is an absolute necessity. Well, it was the only alternative to war. Europe and the entire world, having gone through the horrible experience of 2 world wars in just half a century, and it's not a coincidence that these 2 world wars happened in the beginning, the first half of the 20th century. This is the result of these pressures on resources, right? The population exploded due to the Industrial Revolution. All these countries were industrializing. They needed, all of these resources, the coal and the oil and the gas and so on, and the metals. They went expanding like crazy, throughout the world, conquering by force all of the European nations and creating these colonial systems and raping the entire world to be able to feed Europe's industrialization and these exploding, increasing standard of living, which was done, on the backs, if you want, of the rest of the world, and on the aggression of Europeans. And in 1945, at the end of the Second World War, when the world was in shambles, they realized, if we repeat this, 20 years from now, this time the war is going to be nuclear, because in 1945 the Americans developed nuclear weapons, and by 1948, 1949 the Russians had nuclear weapons too. So had it come to blows between the Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc, it would have been the end of the world. So they said, well, if we can't use war to control population, to bring down population, as has been done for centuries prior, then what do? We have to control population ourselves. So in order to prevent war between nations, they started, in a sense, carrying out a hidden war within nations. And they did this through covert chemical and biological means. And the targets of this war were our fertility and our immunity, because that's what it takes to either prevent birth or to speed up death. So it was, from the very beginning, a substitute to war and the obverse side of nuclear deterrence. They had to do the impossible, the improbable, to make sure that it does not come to a war. That's how this program came to be. Of course, by the 1970s, it became clear that the world was running out of resources. The population was growing too fast in the developing world, because this program of population control started first with the developed world for good reasons. It was the developed world that needed all of these resources to keep its industrialization, its high standard of living going. Not the developing world, not the agrarian world. So they left those people alone until they began to express wishes and ambitions to have our standard of living, our lifestyles, and therefore they're also pursuing industrialization. And as these countries started pursuing industrialization, they were subsumed into the program of population control, because it was realized that the resources are not enough. The entire world cannot possibly have the West's standard of living with the existing resources and the existing population. Something has to give. Either the population goes down or standard of living stays where it is. Of course, you cannot suppress people's desire to live better and better from generation to generation. That's just impossible. But you can suppress fertility so that the population stabilizes, and eventually, right, everybody has the same high standard of living within the limits of the earth. So resource preservation by the 1970s was another imperative that was pushing the population control program. And by the 1990s, yet another prerogative helped along, motivate countries and nations and elites to control population, to wage war on fertility and immunity within their own countries, on their own people, because environmentally it was realized that we are completely destroying the planet. So by now we have three major prerogatives pushing the population control program. There is preserving the war from nuclear annihilation. Secondly, preserving resources for this and future generations so that we all have enough to industrialize and we can access them. And three, environmental preservation, making sure that we don't destroy this planet through our needs and wants and greed and so on. So these are material limitations that are dictated, in a sense, by our existential, drives, by our instinct to procreate and our instinct to survive. No society, no civilization can survive if the instinct to survive and the instinct to procreate are not satisfied. So, and of course, the instinct to procreate has to be tamed. And this is the step that we have to take, in a sense, as I like to say, in our evolution from animals to angels. Because animals cannot control their urge to procreate. They are at the mercy of their reproductive systems. Nature dictates, and they just follow their instincts. We, as higher thinking human beings, who have been so successful that we're now in a situation where we are victims of our own success on this planet, and we have completely taken over the entire planet, we have to now exercise the kind of discipline and forward thinking to the point where we have to limit our own procreative rights in order to make sure that civilization survives, that we don't destroy the planet, and that we don't destroy all of the other species on Earth, because now we are going through the sixth great extinction, and this one is man-made, man-caused. These are the reasons why our governments are committing genocide. They are really in a bind, in a terrible situation. They're not in an enviable situation. These are not crazy people, bloodthirsty maniacs who are at the mercy or following the devil's commands, if you want. They are desperate policymakers trying to keep this world or humanity from self-destruction and from taking down the earth with us in the process, because we are victims of our own success. It's an extraordinary thing, and it's an extraordinary chance, if you want, opportunity. And now, having freed these horrible secrets, and by the way, freeing these secrets could have only been done by an outsider, and this is where I come in. Insiders could not have freed this. Why? When you are a UN member state, part of your duties as a UN member state is to keep the the secrecy of this, of the confidentiality of this program to yourself, and not share it with the population at large, because this has been pursued, since 1945, to secret methods, to covert methods. Each country are different levels of public education, different infrastructures, and so on. So if this knowledge comes out in one place, so let's say in a country like Holland, which has a controlled population for 500 years, and the people easily understand the need for controlling population, but then the other countries would ask questions. Well, if the Dutch do it, then they have to do it, then why don't we do it? Why don't we have to do it? 1 second, I'm just having...
Sure.
Oh, okay. Yes. So it is a terrible conundrum, and our policymakers have pursued this population control program in secret, because this is how it started, and because it was convenient, and because it was much harder to change course from covert to overt than to just continue with the covert methods. Only an outsider could have done this, because an outsider would not have been bound by these confidentiality agreements, and would not have been bound by the system's constraints. So, if you are, let's say, a Secret Service agent or an intelligence agent or a high-ranking member of a government ministry, you are bound by law not to disclose these secrets. If you disclose these secrets, you end up in prison for the rest of your life. You also threaten the freedom and the lives of all of the other members of your cabinet or of the organization you are in, because all of these people and all of these organizations are committing genocide. They are accessories to genocide, and they are guilty of genocide. These are the most horrible crimes that any person or organization can commit. These are crimes with huge repercussions. And I'm working, by the way, on the legal repercussions of this as we speak. And I will publish a paper that will completely change everything within 2 or 3 days, prior to my arrival in Geneva, to shut down the WHO, because I will shut down the WHO with the power of the law behind me. This is the beauty of the program. Nobody will be able to stop me, because I will have the power of the law behind me. And in so doing, I will force a reinstatement of the rule of law. But we'll get back to that in a while. So the program could not have been changed by an insider, could only have been done by an outsider, which is why they exhausted so many resources, human and financial resources, on preventing these truths from coming out. So they've used, deception, misdirection, secrecy, coming down hard on people who would have an inkling of what is going on and would discover perhaps one aspect, and then, they would want to talk about it or publish a paper about it. So they have suppressed this information in the academia, in the news media, of course, and in government hierarchies since 1945, at great cost to the health of our societies, because the social contract has been destroyed, the integrity of our political and religious leaders have been destroyed, the rule of law has been suspended, the administration of justice is completely phony. It's a fiction. The same with our rights and liberties. We only have them so long as we do not try to exercise them. When we try to exercise our rights and freedoms, as I have discovered in exposing, these programs and policies, all of my rights and freedoms have been taken away, with the exception of my life. The only right that I have been allowed to keep is the right to my life. They've taken away my family, my children, my property, my career, my money, absolutely everything. They try to take away my dignity, my credibility, and so on. They try to destroy everybody who raises his head above the system, because everybody in the system is co-conspirator in genocide. And there's only one punishment for genocide. You either hang on a rope or you spend the rest of your life in prison. So we are now in the unenviable situation where our entire governing structure is guilty of genocide in most Western countries starting in the 1950s. I cannot hear you, by the way. Still cannot hear you.
But the Eastern countries.
The Eastern countries have done the same thing. When this program was initiated in 1945, it was by collaboration between the three Allied powers. the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union at that time, Russia now. They won the war, and they were left with the power to decide over the future course of mankind. And decide they did. They imposed population control programs on the losing Axis powers and their co-belligerent nations, so on Germany, Italy, and Japan. Japan was hit the hardest. And because of these Axis powers, these these losing powers who surrendered unconditionally, they were free to do whatever they wanted to, and they did just that. They sterilized the hell out of them with fluoride, by the way. In Japan, with the fluoride supplements, which were handed over to the population in the countryside in pill form, and all the children had to take them, just like you take vitamins or candies. This is how they did it. And it proceeded, in a tit-for-tat fashion. In other words, as the United States imposed it on their allies within the Western sphere of influence, and the UK, the United Kingdom, imposed it on the Commonwealth nations within their sphere of influence, the Soviet Union imposed it on the nations behind the Iron Curtain within their sphere of influence in a tit-for-tat fashion.
Right.
We poisoned Czechoslovakia, you poisoned Belgium. We poisoned Poland, you poisoned France, and so on. This is how they did it, and this is how they proceeded, to this day. Yes.
Well, what I meant also, as well, is that China has been engaging in genocide, according to what you say, because they've been limiting their population.
Well, they did it in the horrible Western way through covert chemical methods only for 10 years.
Oh, I see. And then they switched to a population control method.
They switched to legislation. When they realized, what this does to the population, that you are turning your population into chronically ill, enfeebled, substandard human beings who are sterile and mentally and physically retarded and dysfunctional within 3 generations, they didn't want to go that path.
I see.
They switched, they changed within 10 years. They said, well, using police force and arresting people and sterilizing people, surgically sterilizing people by force is a much better choice than sterilizing them involuntarily through covert chemical methods that also destroy life, destroy health, and degrade intelligence and degrade genetics and so on. They were smart to do it, and they could do it because of their political system at the same time. So they have been fortunate, in a sense, to have a one-party state, with respect to population control. But now we're in a completely different situation. Now we have these means of communication and of educating people and of reaching out, of disseminating information so quickly, virtually costless, that I, as a single individual, despite all of these walls, that have been erected to prevent this information from coming out, and to prevent individuals from speaking out because they come down hard on you and they destroy your lives, somehow I've managed to shatter all of their walls. And as a single individual, I have already reached, a good proportion of humanity. All the people within government, within institutions, within intelligence communities, within the academia, the intelligentsia, the medical, much of the legal professions as well. They've all been listening to from the very beginning, knowing from the very beginning that what I say is true, because they live it, right? They live within the system, and they know that what they're doing is exactly as I described the program and the objectives. They were the first to confirm it in a sense, and surprisingly, the first people to support my my struggle for truth have been people within the intelligence community. I would receive emails from intelligence agents from all over the world saying to me, whatever you do, Kevin, don't stop. Continue what you're doing, because these people are living in hell. You see, when they sign up to work for this or that government, and they sign the confidentiality agreements, and they cannot say a boo. They will follow orders. They will do what they're told. They cannot, it's a military structure. Command orders that percolate down to the lowest within the hierarchy. And these people are completely, fed up with this system, because they have to poison their own citizens their cousins and their brothers and their sisters and their fellow citizens. And I cannot imagine a single human being who would be happy with that. Of course, most of them have been kept in the dark, but they would have a clue. They couldn't put it all in a complex picture that I've managed to assemble now over the past 3 years and explain it in the greatest detail from the onset to the current state and consequences and where that will lead to if continued and so on. So, which is why I have, my main audience has been at the very beginning for the first year and a half, when my work was, bitterly and violently suppressed. I would publish something on the internet, within a day it would be taken down. I would open an email account, within a day it would be shut down. I would buy a new computer, within a month it would be burnt out by remote viruses. And I've played this hide and seek game with the intelligence community, but they were my first audience for the first year and a half. And as I managed to circumvent and bypass, all of their protective walls, and this information came out, once the cat is out of the bag, that's it. It's a done deal. And I was smart enough to do it in such a way that they could no longer contain it. For instance, the first book I published on the subject is called Water, Salt, Milk. I forget the subject. Water, Salt, Milk. Let's leave it there. I've republished it under the title Chemical and Biological Depopulation a couple of years later. But when I published that book, before putting it online and telling, the international community and governments that I know what they're doing and explaining how, I made a lot of copies, a lot of physical copies on DVDs. And I distributed these physical copies, first of all, by mail, by slow mail, to all kinds of human rights organizations around the world. I sent a few copies to the church, to the Vatican, and then I took several dozen copies and gave them to every church, to every parish within the community that I was in at that time. I was in exile at that time in the southern United States, in Florida, and I cycled to the next city, and I put a DVD in the hand of every priest and a religious figure in the town. I also took physical copies, and I simply gave them to people on the street, or left them in the mailboxes of people within 10-20 miles of where I lived. We walked into schools, and I gave copies to the school directors. We walked into a medical office, and I gave copies to doctors. And I made sure that I wrote within one of the chapters in the book that I did just that. That prior to publishing my book online, I took these precautions so that it could not be stopped, because I knew very well that they have full control of electronic communication, and they can interfere with everything and anything online, but they cannot stop something from physically, an object, a DVD, from going from person to person to person and being read, by God knows how many people. And this is how I slipped through their nets. What I also did is I appealed to the international courts early on for protections, and I sued Canada and the UK, which were the two countries that were hounding me because I'm a Canadian citizen. I sued them at these 3 international courts, and I specified why and what rights they violated, and I asked for protection under the law. And even though my lawsuits went nowhere because they were not even acknowledged, it appears that some kind of protection was afforded me, because nobody has touched me since. I have been given, in a sense, a green light to say what no other human being on the planet could say, because most, 99.99% of the population has no clue, and because those who have a clue cannot say it. They are bound by the system. They are prisoners of the system. A system, by the way, that functions by mutual coercion, mutually agreed upon.
Right. Right.
Extraordinary things.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in terms of the 15 points, at this point, where would you say we are in terms of your presentation of the 15 points?
I kind of started with the end and then went to the beginning points. But to recap, from memory. So the program started as a peace preservation measure in 1945. Then it became also a resource preservation method by 1970 and an environmental preservation method by the 1990s. It was done or imposed on countries by mutual coercion, mutually agreed upon. The organization that was set up to coordinate this global program had to be a neutral organization, had to be above nation state. So this is why they created this intergovernmental organization called the United Nations and its many agencies to oversee, to coordinate this program of covert population control and coerced globalization. Because this international system depends on these two wheels, on this axis of covert depopulation, coerced globalization. Why covert depopulation? By controlling population growth in every country can live within its means and does not need to start wars of aggression to take resources away from other countries that do not belong to them. Why coerced globalization? Well, because natural resources are unevenly distributed around the world. But every nation and every population needs them equally to develop and to prosper. So you see, most of the oil nowadays, most of the globe's oil is held, under the sands of the Middle East, under the tundra of Russia, and some, in Canada and so on, and some in Venezuela. It's very patchy. A handful of countries control the world's oil resources. Well, if the system was not developed to force these countries to share their resources with the rest of the world on equal terms through the open markets, then only these countries could prosper. Only these countries could be industrialized, could be developed, while the rest would stay back, stuck in the Middle Ages, stuck in agrarian societies. So this is why coerced globalization. They do not allow the political systems of every nation to have control over resources, because they would then limit them to the use of their own people. And that would force other countries to invade, countries that have these resources in order to be able to access them, which is what many European countries did. Germany, for instance, started the Second World War for this very reason. All of the other Western nations, England and Holland and Spain and Portugal and so on, had gone out, had built these colonial systems, and they were, raping the entire world, while Germany, which was basically landlocked, had nowhere to go. So the only place they could expand to was their neighbors, and this is exactly what they did. They expanded, west and east, into Eastern Europe and Western Europe. So they wanted to avoid this. This is what the axis of the New World Order, of the international system since 1945. Covert depopulation, coerced globalization. This is a very important point. But whereas coerced globalization has been pursued openly, covert depopulation has been pursued, obviously, with the utmost secrecy, because the covert depopulation program violates the most fundamental rights and liberties that we have, bypasses the rule of law, and bypasses democratic checks and balances. It makes virtually everything in Western societies a fiction.
Right. Now, let me just bring up this point, which was a second point that I was going to ask you after China. But it refers really both to the 2 points that you referred to, and to the WHO, and to the action that you're about to take, okay?
Yeah.
Yes. There's a strange convergence there. And the question is multiple parts, but I'll be very brief. You're about to go to the WHO headquarters and with the legal infrastructure and with the thing. We're about to start a pageant that occurs every 4 years in Rio, namely the Olympics. And the WHO is on the world television every day saying, don't worry about those swamps where the golfers are playing, because the Zika virus is not a problem, okay? And all of us can question about whether the Zika virus is a setup, whether this was like another setup. Oh my God, what a
I can tell
setup
you,
from from a depopulation point of view.
yes.
My 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 kind of point is this: is that this is an amazing kind of convergence that you're flying into Geneva with the WHO just as the Olympics are starting, where the WHO is front and center saying, don't stop the Olympics. I mean, I'm quoting a WHO official that was on BBC International 2 nights ago saying, you should not miss the Olympics. In fact, come to the Olympics. Your chances of getting the Zika virus are infinitesimal, just as the golfers, the championship golfers are saying, you think I'm going to play in that swamp? You're crazy. So
I can put everybody at rest.
yeah. So tell us.
You see, the Zika epidemic is a complete fiction, as all other public health emergencies of international concerns that the WHO has issued in the past 7 years during the leadership of our esteemed Dr. Margaret Chan, that I'm going to nab when I go to Geneva and throw out of the continent, put her on the next plane to China. Why?
Legally nab. Legally
Yes,
nab.
absolutely legally.
I just
I'll
want to
explain
keep
legal.
you out of trouble.
Yes, I'm going to explain also the force of the law that I bring behind me with me when I go to Geneva. So ever since she took over the leadership of the WHO 7 years ago, there have been 4 of these so-called pandemics or epidemics, all of them completely fictitious, by the way. And she is in a sense responsible. Obviously, she's not solely responsible. She's just a figurehead for this new international instrument of forcing, under the cover of protecting the public from an epidemic or a pandemic, forcing involuntary sterilization methods. She has done this 4 times. She's responsible for creating this legal international instrument called a public health emergency of international concern. And the Zika so-called epidemic is the latest one. And they scare the public how? By saying that Zika is responsible for microcephaly, the shrinking of the brain in children, which is complete fiction. But this is what they need to do in order to bypass any kind of legal restrictions to reducing population growth. And of course, all of the Latin America has a problem with population growth because it is, a Catholic stronghold, and most governments there do not allow contraceptives, and most governments there do not allow abortion. This is how they bypass all of these legal limits, the inability of people to use contraceptives because they're either too poor, because the Catholic Church stands in the way, and because legislation stands in the way, and abortion. So they create these health scares, these completely invented or engineered pandemics and epidemics. Then they advise, people that, well, guess what? This virus, this Zika virus, if you get pregnant now, it's a really bad time. You might end up with a child with a shrunken brain. And who wants to raise a child with a shrunken brain, right? Nobody. So they advised, the next thing they did, they advised the ministers of health in all these countries advised women to delay pregnancy for 3 to 4 years. But how the hell do you delay pregnancy for 3 to 4 years in countries where people have no access to contraceptives, or they can't afford contraceptives, and they can't abort? And by the way, I'm no friend of abortion. If we use contraceptives, we don't need to abort. As simple as that. By creating these health threats and then forcing people to be medicated or sterilized through vaccinations. See, the vaccines have already been created, right? First of all, Zika virus poses no threat to human health. It's been around for ages. But now they have a motive, a pretext to involuntarily sterilize people with vaccines, and they have a pretext of forcing people to be inoculated. by saying that, well, we have to create herd immunity. We can't allow anybody to refuse vaccination because then you jeopardize herd immunity. If you don't get vaccinated and if you're not being immunized against Zika, then you can pass it on to somebody else. And this is the other lie that they said then, that the Zika virus and the Zika infection is transmissible through the sexual act, which is complete fiction again. Why? Well, people think twice about, procreating at a time when Zika is rampant and, is presumably devastating the continent. And then people are more prone to say, well, if I'm going to have sex, then I might as well wear a condom or, wear use some kind of contraceptives to prevent that I don't get infected with this disease. So they are increasing the contraceptive prevalence rate, which is the next step towards switching from covert to overt methods. You have to change people's approach to sex, right? People have to become used to faithfully using contraceptives, and preferably condoms and other barrier contraceptives, so that they can prevent other transmissible diseases. But they don't care. Any kind of contraceptives is what they want. They don't care about transmissible disease. They just want people to use contraceptives. Until such time as people get used to using contraceptives faithfully, they cannot legislate. Because how do you force people to use contraceptives? You can't. You can't be in everybody's bedroom. This is why they poisoned the food and the water and the beverages and the cosmetic products and the dental products in the West. So they don't have to have a cop in every bedroom and say to Joe and Mary, no sex tonight. You can't have children for the next 5 years. They do this through the basic elements of life. Everybody turns on the tap and drinks the fluoridated water. Bingo. Sterilized for the day. Everybody drinks now, beverages, beer, pop, whatever, out of plastic bottles. Well, bisphenol A, that's what it was created for, to be a sterilizant. So they did this, but poor nations cannot do this. You see, this is very costly. And poor people in poor countries, they don't buy bottled water. They don't have fluoridated water because the government can't afford to pay for that, and they don't have water infrastructures to be able to fluoridate the water. So they developed other methods for those countries, which is why they did, for instance, salt fluoridation. They fluoridated the salt, and you cannot buy any salt throughout Latin America that is not fluoridated for this reason. The government transferred the cost of fluoridation to the consumer. It's not the government paying for it; it's the people buying the salt paying for it. And everybody cooks, and uses salt. So therefore, everybody sterilizes himself or herself through the salt that they themselves buy. They buy their own poison. They pay for their own poison. That's the kind of methodology had to be created for the developed world. But it's still not enough. You see, the body is very, very resilient. So now they need these public health emergencies of international concern to be able to vaccinate people. Vaccines are very effective. And the technology of interfering with the reproductive system through vaccines is so advanced now and so cheap, and they no longer leave it in the hands of the people. You see, the government has control now. Everybody gets inoculated, everybody gets sterilized. Everybody gets inoculated, everybody's going to die earlier, just when the government needs them to do. Because, by the way, another one of the grand objectives of the global depopulation policy and of the sustainability agenda is to bring lifespans to a sustainable, to an ecologically acceptable level, which is 70 to about 75 years of age. We already live too long in the Western world, according to our leaders and to this system that we have become part of and at the mercy of. They want us dead around 70 to 75. We work to 65. We live another 5 to 10 years as pensioners on the government's dole, and then, we're dead, helped to an early death. The government can't allow us to live to 90, to pay, our pensions for 30 years, at which point every human being would become a liability and not an asset for the government coffers. So all of these international public health emergencies of international concern are pretexts under which to involuntarily sterilize entire populations, and to do so by the power of this medical emergency, which is the only power that they can invoke to bypass existing laws. Herd immunity bypasses, the law that says, you cannot do abortion, you cannot use contraceptives, you cannot do this or that. That's what they're there for. And this technology, the vaccines that they're using now to involuntarily sterilize people, and there are various methods of doing this by either interfering with the hormones, or by reprogramming the genes so that the reproductive systems do not develop properly. The potential of sterilizing people for a lifetime, so not just temporarily sterilizing, is now enormous. And there is no telling what the health consequences are going to be because of the use of these biological methods of population control. Until now, they rely primarily on chemical, and we see what that has done. They have created this epidemic of non-communicable diseases. They have chronically sickened 60% of the population, and they threaten the sickening of the entire population. What are these biological methods that are also untried and untested going to do over the long term to us, to our children, to future generations?
Right.
Nothing good, because the moment you interfere with the reproductive system, you damage the entire human body. Why? The reproductive system, reproduction, is vital to survival. You cannot reproduce, you're no good for survival. You're no good to your species because you cannot pass on, you cannot produce offspring, therefore the species will not survive. Nature will not keep anybody alive who is incapable of reproduction. Nature would not allow the reproductive system to die out. A species will die out before the reproductive system stops working. So the moment you interfere with the reproductive system, you are engineering the end of that species. There is no safe way of doing it. You cannot do it in isolation. They did it through endocrine disruptors, through chemical methods, and they destroyed the entire endocrine system. Hence, the epidemic of non-communicable diseases. Now they do it through vaccination, through inoculation, through biological methods. God knows what the consequences are going to be. I can guarantee you that the consequences are going to be dire, are going to be negative, and only negative. There's going to be no positive consequences whatsoever. So they're playing with fire. They're using us as guinea pigs again, population-wide.
Right. Now, let me ask you this. Assuming arguendo, you go to Geneva, you make your arguments, you're successful, we begin to stop this negative depopulation program. Let's talk about some of the solutions, given, as you say, that there are these, I'm not, arguendo, let's just assume that it's correct. Given, as you say, that there are these limits to population growth, objective limits to population growth, what are some of the positive solutions that in your mind exist or that we can begin to implement as opposed to the genocide that we're now practicing?
We are now in the right position to do it. We couldn't do it 20, 30, 40 years ago. First of all, we have an international infrastructure. We have a global system, the United Nations and its agencies that exist for this sole purpose. So we already have the tentacles to be able to disseminate the information we need, to be able to disseminate the contraceptives we need across the globe. All we need now is to switch from covert to overt. In other words, we need legislation. This legislation has to be global, and this legislation can only be one. That is replacement level fertility across the globe for all times, without exceptions.
What does that mean? What does that mean, practically speaking?
It means henceforth, no couple on Earth will be allowed to have more than 2 children, unless their second pregnancy is twins or triplets or quadruplets, in which case nobody's going to come around and murder babies. so that statistics match. But it's not necessary because replacement level fertility is about 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 children depending on society. So that means that the low incidence of twins and triplets and quadruplets is statistically insignificant, and children will never again have to be murdered.
Okay. Practically speaking, how do you enforce that in a non-totalitarian society?
They have to. We already have a global organization called the United Nations. However, this global organization has been pursuing this very goal of limiting everybody to 2 children covertly with the collaboration, tacit or implicit, forced or coerced or willing or voluntary or whatever, of almost every nation on earth, with very, very few exceptions. So we know that they can do it. They have been doing it covertly for all these years. All they have to do now is all the governments that we have in place now, they have to agree that the task or the responsibility for limiting the planet to 2 children only has to fall on this global organization, not the United Nations because it's discredited, but the United Nations has to be reformed in what I would like to call the United Peoples Organization, and tasked, empowered to enforce a global replacement level fertility law, to which every country agrees, every government agrees to give this responsibility, this power over to this international body, to this global body called the United Peoples Organization, for lack of a better name.
But think of all the social consciousness changes that would have to happen, even in an industrial country like the United States, which is politically, it's ruled by fundamentalists.
Yeah, but when the fundamentalists hear that they have only 2 choices, either continuing with covert methods, so they're going to be poisoned into oblivion, and within 1 or 2 generations, they'll no longer be around, okay? Or accepting, imposing, limits to fertility, 2 children, which is acceptable, for every couple. This is a very easy choice to make. Obviously, no person in their right mind is going to say, yeah, continue to poison us. Sure, give me that fluoridated water. Give me that, bisphenol A poisoned container of whatever, of cheese. Give me that tomato sprayed with glyphosates and so on. Yeah, give me more of that. My child is already mentally retarded, and cannot sit still for 3 seconds. And he's never going to have another child, because that genetic lineage has already been terminated. There is no choice there.
Okay.
Either
what
we're
about,
going to annihilate it through poisoning or
no,
control.
I hear you. I mean, but it's a mammoth task to
But we have
political and social re-education of the planet.
Yeah, but that's an easy thing to do.
Which is, i.e., that's what the New World Order was trying to do, right? Political and social re-education.
The New World Order has never tried to educate. That has imposed this on us. That's why they've used covert methods. But this education of the public is facilitated by 2 things that were not available previously. First of all, a telecommunication system that is global, that is cheap, that is virtual, and that can reach everybody in all corners of the earth. Secondly, we already have a huge centralization of the media, and tremendous financial and human resources that are being dedicated to creating programs that have no significance whatsoever, instead of educating the public. Instead of entertaining the public with idiotic programs, use those resources to educate the public in an entertaining way, rather than to mislead the public in an entertaining way. It's the same resources, the same people. Nothing has to increase or decrease. You just change the onus from misdirecting and miseducate and keeping people stupid and ignorant to educating them.
No, right. I can see that sea change from a theoretical point of view. However, what you have in say the world media matrix, for example, in the advanced countries in North America in Europe is that you have a whole social brainwashing function going on, where that's how they brainwash the public into accepting war, into accepting their position in a in a in a matrix universe, the whole falsehood. And that's all based on matrix capitalism. How are we going to take all of those forces and change them? How is that fundamental structural change going to happen? Because the media is just the tail that wags the dog.
Yeah, but you forget that the media plays this role now because of the global depopulation program proceeding through covert means.
Yeah.
See, they needed the cooperation and collaboration of the media to mislead the public.
Exactly.
And to suppress information. When the onus changes from covert to overt, the media's role changes from misleading to educating.
Yeah.
No additional resources have to be spent. It's the exact same people, the exact same technology, the exact same resources, but the onus has changed. Instead of misleading and keep people ignorant, you educate them to be able to empower them to take over, to take control. So the responsibility is going to be shifted from the government's shoulder to the people's shoulder. One is going to be buttressed by the power of the law, so there's no dissenters, because you cannot have exceptions. If you have exceptions within two or three generations, the exceptions are going to be numerically in the majority, while those people who have respected the law are going to be, in the minority. So you cannot create these special rights and privileges. This is a right, the right to procreate, that is going to be limited. It's going to be limited by everybody without exceptions. It doesn't matter that you are, Sultan Abdul Hamid Khafalid, who earns, $300 billion a year, or you are Joe Blow, the plumber, who earns, a measly $8 an hour. The exact same law is going to apply to everybody without exception. That's what's going to make it palatable and acceptable, because people will see the justice of it. They're going to see, first of all, the logic of it. They're going to understand its necessity, but they will never accept it if there are special rights, which is what the Indians did try and do, by the way, in the 1950s, when they first introduced methods of population control. Well, the rich said, why don't we just round up the poor, put them in these camps, give them a radio as a prize for sterilizing them, and within 2 or 3 years they had a revolution on their hands. They just about got lynched. The leadership of India. People will have no choice but to accept limits to fertility, because it's going to be universal. It's going to be without exception. It is existential, and it is dictated not by politics, by religion, by ideology. It is dictated by the limits of the planet. It is not in our hands. It is, in a sense, in God's hands, which, by the way, why the current program of population control is dictated, and it is morally and ethically controlled by religious authorities. The ultimate controllers of this program are religious authorities. Why? Because it is an ethical issue, it is a moral issue, and secular authorities, especially governments that they change every 4 years, could not possibly take on this multi-generational task when they're going to be replaced in 4 years anyway. And secondly, they cannot possibly accept responsibility for this ethical, violation, this moral violation, unless they're buttressed by, they're supported by religious authorities, who are the ultimate authorities in matters of morality and ethics in a society.
Right. Now,
this is why it's in the hands of religious authorities.
Right. Now, I can see the integrity of the logic of the position that you're taking, and there are many that would say, wait a minute, the religions are really nothing more than political organizations, and many of them are corrupt. How can we continue to give them any moral authority?
Yeah, and they have been corrupted by the same necessity to proceed in secret. And if you have the time, I urge you, and I urge all your listeners to read a paper that I wrote called the Holy Grail,
Uh-huh.
controlling human life on the planet. The Holy
Okay.
Grail.
Is that
Available on,
available online?
yes, the Holy Grail, controlling human life on the planet, and then just Google my name, Galalae, Galalae, and you'll come across it. And in this paper, I describe how the religious authorities have been in control of limiting human life on the planet for at least 1,000 years in the case of Christianity. And that role has been assumed by the Vatican, by the Holy See. It is an extraordinary paper. It completely changed the way you look at religion, you look at society. Because religion was the first government, was the political system of Europe before secular governments came into being. And they had not only secular, but not only spiritual, but also secular political control of society. And they were in charge of population control, and they proceeded in methods that were possible in those days. And I explain those methods. It's going to be illuminating,
Right.
completely illuminating. So the church, especially the Vatican, the Pope, they have at least 1,000 years of experience with population control. And now they have been wrestling for power with the secular authorities, with the United Nations, in a sense, to dictate how this is going to be done, by what covert methods. But there's no disagreement between secular and religious authorities that they will continue to proceed in secret methods until I busted their party and shattered their secrecy, so they can no longer hide. So now they're all coming out in the open, and surprisingly, Pope Francis made a statement a few months ago through an interviewer as he was flying back from Hong Kong, I believe, or from Asia, from the Philippines, yes. And he admitted that, yes, we in the West have also controlled population, and it has not gone so well. Like China, we in the West have also controlled population, but not openly, in different ways, and it has not gone so well. And now we are looking at other options.
Right. Right.
It was one of the admissions that I forced Pope Francis to make, because now sooner or later they have to come out. So what they're trying to do now is they're trying to engineer, if you want, the soft landing. You will see now. You see already that all of Hollywood movies, they have a population theme sort of embedded in them. Either subliminal or direct, either as a side subject or as the main subject. So the education have started. Now there's also all kinds of little documentaries coming out, about population issues and the need to control population. There's the academia is coming out and is publishing things. They're still hiding the reasons why fertility has gone down. They're not admitting to covert methods, but I've already done that for them. The world already knows. Those people who want to open their eyes, they know my material is accessible, even though it is suppressed by the mainstream media. But then again, who listens to the mainstream media nowadays? Nobody. Everybody takes their news from.
Well, we can begin to change that thought. So
We have to.
what you're saying is this. You're making the rational case that we need to control our population. We're now doing it through genocide. If you were to use a single word or two or a short phrase, right now we're doing it through genocide. What would be that word or short phrase that we should change to?
We would be doing it through empowerment. You enlighten and empower the education. You enlighten them
and empower. Okay.
Yes, you enlighten them with the information they need to understand the need for population control, and you empower them with the methodology, the knowledge, and the tools to control their own children, the number of children. In other words, you provide contraceptives cheaply, safely.
Right. So now we understand. Now we're starting to come to the end of this segment.
Yes.
Are there any points that you had wanted to raise in this segment that you have not had the opportunity to raise yet?
Yes.
Okay.
It's an extraordinary thing how I will checkmate the international system when I go to Geneva now.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, you see, I'm going to Geneva with the full force of the law behind me.
Okay.
You see, the World Health Organization is located in Geneva, Switzerland, and is therefore, and the Human Rights Council, by the way, these two extraordinarily important UN system organizations, they're both located in Geneva. Therefore, they're subject to Swiss law. They're also subject to international law. So never mind that I will clearly show how they violate international law, especially the Geneva Genocide Convention and also the Bioethics Convention of 2005 and several other conventions. But I will also highlight how they violate the Swiss Criminal Code. And as it turns out, the Swiss Criminal Code, perhaps more so than any other criminal code on this planet, and I suspect it is because they are housing these international organizations that they knew they have to keep under control somehow, and what better way to do it than under the threat of legal consequences. And within the Swiss Criminal Code, there are 5 articles that are empowering me. There is Article 11, which is called Commission by Omission, which says that failing to comply with our duty to act makes us as culpable as those who have committed a crime. In other words, those of us who know that the World Health Organization are poisoning humanity into sterility and ill health for whatever reasons, we are now bound by law to intervene and to stop them. It is our duty to assist. The Swiss call it commission by omission, but most countries they call it the duty to assist. This goes back, to at least 1,000 years in Christianity, this duty to assist. Then there is Article 15, which is called legitimate self-defense. And it says that if any person is unlawfully attacked or threatened with imminent attack, the person attacked and any other person are entitled to ward off the attack by means that are reasonable in their circumstances. So legitimate self-defense allows us to use any and all reasonable force necessary to ward off the attack. Keep in mind that for the past 3 years, I have pleaded with governments and the international system. I have provided evidence. I gave them ultimatums with good effect because they've initiated the elimination of chemical methods due to my efforts. But now sneakily they're trying to replace chemical methods with biological methods, which we cannot allow. We have to force them to legislate. So we have under Article 15 the right to legitimate self-defense. Under Article 16, mitigatory self-defense, which says that if as a result of excusable excitement or panic we use excessive force in our self-defense, and no court can consider this to be a crime. In other words, we have a duty to intervene. We have a duty to use any and all force, but that force cannot be excessive. Well, we have already exhausted all peaceful means. I have already exhausted all peaceful means 3 times over. Now, I've already told the World Health Organization I'm going there alone and unarmed. I'm not going to harm anybody. I'm not going to start, kicking and screaming and beating people up. That's not my style. I'm a civilized person. I'm going there merely to comply with my legal responsibilities and duties, according to all of these articles of Swiss law that I am enumerating as now, and that they will have at hand prior to my arrival there. So there is this Article 16, mitigatory self-defense, where we can use whatever force necessary to stop this mayhem. Then there is Article 17, legitimate act in a situation of necessity. And under Article 17, the law allows us to carry out an act otherwise considered criminal to protect ourselves or others from danger, so long as we safeguard interests of higher value. And no prosecutor on this earth will be able to argue that protecting our species, our children, and our fellow man from poisoning and genocide through covert chemical and biological means does not constitute interests of higher value, especially since now the scientific evidence of the damage done by this continuous program of population control by covert chemical and biological methods is unquestionable. Then there is Article 18, mitigatory act in a situation of necessity, which says that committing an act that carries a criminal penalty in order to save ourselves or others from harm is not an offense in the eyes of the law if we did not have a choice. If we did not have a choice. Well, after 4 years of unheeded pleas and ultimatums to those who poison us and our children, it is safe to say that the application of force is a measure of last resort at this point. But even so, I'm not going there to apply physical force. I'm going there merely to exercise my legal responsibilities and duties, and to tell them to leave the building, to seal the building, to change course, to reinstate the rule of law, and to reinstate decency and sanity to our international system. Last but not least, there is Article 128, failure to offer aid in an emergency, which states that any person who fails to offer aid to another whom he has injured, or another who is in immediate life-threatening danger, in circumstances where the person either could reasonably have been expected to offer aid, any person who prevents or hinders others from offering aid is liable to a custodial sentence not exceeding 3 years or a monetary penalty. So in other words, every day the depopulation program is allowed to continue. Countless innocents around the world are being crippled, sterilized, chronically sickened, enfeebled, prematurely killed, irreversibly degraded both intellectually and genetically. So failure to stop this global depopulation policy is, according to Article 128, a failure to offer aid in an emergency, a crime punishable by up to 3 years of imprisonment. And these are just, you know, the legal, the technical, the specific articles of law within the Swiss Criminal Code that empowers me to walk in there with the full power of the law, shut down that building, send everybody home, and say nobody comes home until such time as our leaders declare openly that all covert methods are going to be stopped. The United Nations, the World Health Organization is reformed, and so on. So you see, if I were not to do this, and if a person who has the same knowledge as I do, and who does not proceed as I do, in other words, who does not employ, who does not use the duty to assist, or live up to the demands of the duty to assist, is in violation of the law. If I were not to try everything possible and to use any force necessary to stop the WHO and the international system from committing genocide, I am in violation of the law. So are you. So is everybody who listens to this show, who has awareness of knowledge of the global genocide. We have a duty to assist. We have to act, and we are empowered by the law to use any and all force necessary to stop the genocide. This is the beauty of this. I am checkmating the international system with the power of the law, which is going to be re-engaged. You see, as I go there, the Swiss government has only two choices. Either they allow me to chase everybody out of the building and seal the building, and then they allow the international system, they say, this is all in your hands, we want nothing to do with this, you solve this mess, you created this mess, you solve it at the United Nations. Or they'll come and they arrest me, they charge me with disturbing the peace or whatever, some minor offense. They bring me to a jail, and then my case will have to be brought in front of a judge. And the judge will have to look at the evidence, and they'll have to say, well, has Kevin Galalae acted legally? Does he have, a case here? Is he legally entitled to do what he's doing? Or is he outside of his jurisdiction, outside of his rights and duties? And of course, the law is very clear. I am not only am I fully within my rights to do this, I am compelled by the law to do this. As are you now that you are aware of what is going on, and everybody else who is aware of what is going on.
That is that there is an affirmative duty, because we are all common members of the species under international law to save the species.
And to save in the case of our children, for instance, we have an extra duty, an extra legal duty, because we are guardians of our children. So we have to protect them from any threat.
Yeah.
There are other provisions. Another provision within the Swiss Criminal Code which is extraordinary. It says that no government agency is exempt, and there are no covenants and no special rights, and they specified about 20 different legislations that give special privileges to governments and to policymakers to be immune from prosecution. But in the case of commission of genocide and use of chemical weapons, for instance, there's absolutely no exemption for anybody.
Right. Now, are you going to be appearing before the WHO and in whatever proceedings happen in that, they call it pro se, on your own behalf? Or will you be accompanied by others? How is that going to occur?
I already told them that I'm coming alone, but that I am bringing the will of 7 billion people with me and the rage of an additional 3 billion whose lives they have prevented from being, or they have destroyed prematurely.
Right.
I am also, I have taken precautions. A month ago, perhaps more than a month ago now, if I think back, I have written to the Swiss government, the Swiss federal government, to the regional Geneva government, and as well to the Geneva police chief, telling them that I will be coming and that this is what I intend to do: shut down the WHO, do a citizen's arrest on Dr. Chan and put her on the next plane to China, and that I asked them not to force me to do this, that it is actually their duty to do so under the law. But if they fail in their duties, then I will do it. They should be ready for it. I wrote to the WHO.
Did you include a legal brief with that, yes, or a statement
No,
of
I
the
didn't
law?
include a legal brief yet. I'll be sending them the legal brief before I arrive there, once I finish working on it. But I included all of the evidence that they need to establish that indeed the WHO and the UN system commit genocide and violate so many other covenants, international covenants, and national criminal code violations. And I provided the evidence that they indeed subvert fertility and immunity for the sake of controlling population, and they do it through these methods and to these effects. So the evidence is there. It's the fruit of my labor for the past 4 years, because I've published 10 books on the subject and hundreds of articles, and I've been very, very busy, and of course, not just providing the evidence, but also forcing authorities to change course with great success, I might add. So I have no doubt whatsoever that I will succeed. It's the only question that remains to be answered is how long will it take me and exactly how that will play out. But it's going to be extraordinarily interesting. What I'm going to do also, once I arrive in the city, I'm going to the Geneva police chief. I'm giving her, the legal brief, telling her when I'm going to the WHO building to shut down the building. Ask them to escort me and to aid me in doing this. If they refuse, then I will tell them I will go alone. I will also go to the UN Human Rights Council, which is the most important, most authoritative legal body within the UN system. And there's no coincidence that it is located in Geneva. They are located in Geneva to keep eye on WHO. You see, that's why, because they know that the WHO is poisoning people into sterility and low immunity or morbidity. And so they have to do it, as civilized and as kindly as humanly possible, if such a thing is possible. So I will put the ball in their court as well, because they will have evidence and they will have the legal justification for my actions.
Will you be advising any members of the media in Geneva, or?
No, because it's a waste of time. I have been advising the media for 6 years now, and they don't say anything. They don't write anything. They don't. The complete silence. They are the most useless organization on earth now. They're not the fifth estate. They're just a burden on society and causing irreparable harm by their attitude. So I have no respect and no trust in the media whatsoever, and I'm no longer wasting my time on the media. But they know what I'm doing anyway. They are keeping an eye on what I'm doing, and they Some of them hope that I will succeed. Others don't, because they know if I succeed, many people who are responsible will have to go to prison.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we
There's
were,
has some kind of a resolution to this.
yeah, yeah. Um, at the time of the second special session on disarmament in 1982, which was in New York, then we went to Vienna. That was in June of 1982. Then we went to Vienna to the Outer Space Conference later in the summer. And after that, we were a part of the media, accredited media and non-governmental organizations at the UN Geneva. This is part of my own career history, so I'm familiar with UN Geneva a bit. So our alternate media organization would be very happy to conduct an interview with you as part of this process. You know, once it happens, and we can conduct an interview via Skype with you at, you know, say once things become clear, we would be very happy to conduct a follow-up interview with you.
In the media's defense, I should say this. Because they cannot say what needs to be said with respect to population control, their hands are tied, and they have offered their complete collaboration with the system. But the one thing that they did, the media, is they conferred me full accreditation as a bona fide journalist. And
oh, good.
I am a journalist, and I'm now a representative of the profession, if you want, but only because, you know, nobody is doing their jobs. I had to become a journalist just as I've had to become a lawyer, and I've had to become an epidemiologist, and I've had to become, you know, a political activist and a revolutionary, if you want, and a think tank, and half a dozen other things, because that's what it takes to bring down an international system on its knees. And that's one thing that the media has done, has empowered me to speak on their behalf, if you want. So I am now a media person because nobody is doing their jobs.
Well, then that's very good, and so then you have the credentials and the stature to speak for, you know, to speak from a particular platform, and that's very good, because you are, you know, you have certain guarantees under law that what you're saying and that your actions under law are protected. So that is reassuring.
That's a fiction, trust me. And I know, because I've been to prison 7 times. So, you know, I know that there are no rights that are that cannot be taken away from you with respect to population control. But at least, you know, now I know that they are allowing me to do what they're not allowing anybody else to do. So that's a good thing. I have obtained, you know, special privileges, if you want, that not even heads of state have, because they cannot say what I can say. That is the encouraging thing. The extraordinary thing is that over the past year, I have been able to publish my findings, my scientific findings, if you want, within the professional publications of medicine, so in medical journals. And I've published 3 to date that are extraordinarily important, and that has given me extraordinary respect within the medical community, and also renown. Now I'm very, very solicited by the medical community to publish, you know, more than I can possibly publish, because my resources are very limited, and because I do a lot more than just provide scientific evidence. The onus and of my efforts are on actually changing the policy, forcing policy changing, compelling policy change, and not on providing evidence and educating. That's, you know, I've done that for the past 3 or 4 years, and I have now the respect of the medical community and their stamp of approval. That what I say, you know, with respect to the global population program and the effects on human health and the collaboration of medicine and the perversion of medicine and public health to function as handmaidens of genocide is true. And that, of course, makes what I say, carry weight, because I am the only person now really to have medical accreditation, or at least credibility, to have credibility as a social scientist, as an expert in geopolitics, to be also a media mouthpiece, and to have quite a bit of experience in the meantime also with public speaking, because this is not my first interview, but probably the 100th interview on this subject.
Right.
So I can speak now with authority. Nobody can accuse me or can try to shut me down, by accusing me of being a conspiracy theorist. Those accusations have stopped a long time ago. Nor can governments make a case or try and make a case that I am mentally unstable in order to discredit me, which, by the way, is what they tried at the very beginning.
Right.
And they separated me from my children, in all of these things in retaliation. And all of these things are tried and tested methods that have worked for them, for 70 years, but they did not work with me. If I may be allowed to use some French here, they fucked with the wrong person, and now they're reaping the price of their arrogance. You see, their methods have worked beautifully for 70 years, and they thought that they can work, for forever. Well, they couldn't. Why? Not because I'm such a great guy, but because I have the power of the internet now at my fingertips.
Right.
You see, before our generation, people were limited. They could not communicate with the world unless they could access the media and publishers. And of course, all publishers and all media are controlled by the system. But the internet is not. The social media is not, and it's free, and or at least very, very cheap. So having been able to bypass, all of their blocks, to communicate with the outside world, and having received a lot of assistance, tacit assistance from God knows how many people and organizations, behind the scenes, they were not able to stop me.
Is there a tentative timeline for the events in Geneva, or?
Yes, I'm leaving Bucharest, Romania on the 22nd of July, so that's it's the 16th already. And I'm going to Germany first. We'll spend 4 days there, and I'm flying to Geneva on the 26th. I booked the flight today, by the way. So I arrive in Geneva on the 26th of this month, and I intend to be at the doors of the World Health Organization on the 28th.
Well, we'll all be watching very intently. Is there a website or a blog that we can watch where you post updates, or Facebook page or something?
I do it through my Facebook account, the 2 Facebook accounts that I have, so under my name, through my LinkedIn account, also under my name, the academia account as well, and through my YouTube channel, if I will happen to have somebody to film there. I'm hoping that Rupert, who came with me, Rupert Quaintance, who was with me in Rome and who did a wonderful job filming everything, will perhaps manage to come. But I don't have the funds to pay, so it looks like I'm going to be alone. So if I'm out of jail, if they do not imprison me, then I will communicate on a daily basis with the public at large, as I always do. I keep everybody well informed, so you will not miss anything. But if you don't hear from me after the 28th, then you will know that I have been imprisoned, and the silence is the result of no longer being free. Then you'll know I'm
so that if that's the case, we in the media can start making inquiries,
asking questions. Yes, this is why I'm asking civil society to assist me in this way. First of all, once I'm arrested, perhaps one of the legal organizations can provide legal assistance. In the meantime, I have become very, well, I shouldn't say very, but competent as a lawyer, because I've had to defend myself against innumerable accusations, false accusations in Canada. So I have become my own lawyer, and I've had to represent myself, because all lawyers are paid by the government and are there to represent the government's interests, and not their client's interest, especially in this case. So I'm very capable of defending myself, but of course it will make a world of difference if I have legal assistance because I will be able to access materials. A lawyer,
Yeah.
for instance, will be able to bring me legal materials,
Sure.
and any lawyer will have to work with me anyway because nobody has the knowledge that I have about the global program of population control, and I would have to educate the lawyer in this respect before he or she can defend me in court.
Exactly.
Yes.
Good.
So the media,
Good.
I mean, the civil society will have to play a role. I'm hoping that they will,
Yeah.
that they will ask questions, make a lot of noise, and provide me with some legal assistance if
Yeah.
need.
Now I'm looking here at the GoFundMe.com campaign, and of course we will put that in the article accompanying this, and the link to that will be in the video description
Yes.
of this video, so people who want to support that can do that. People who want to communicate with you, how should they do that?
My email is published. Is publicly known.
Yeah.
Open to everybody. They can access me through LinkedIn, through Facebook, and so on. Through academia, through any of these channels, Skype. But I should say that, as always, with my actions, due to the extraordinary limitations that I had to work with or work around, I am going without a safety net to Geneva, financially at least. I have enough money to fly there, and I have enough money to stay for 3 days. So I'm hoping that they either arrest me very fast, or so that the Swiss government provides the accommodation free of cost, or that I will be allowed to defend myself from liberty, and I will be returning probably to Romania and prepare a legal defense from here. And that's probably what will happen anyway because of the nature of this. But I only have enough money to stay for 3 nights in a hotel as it is, which is absolutely not enough. And I don't even have enough money to fly home. I might have enough money to take a bus home if I find a cheap one. So
so this is the condition of the people at the moment.
Yes, absolutely. And everything I've done over the past 5 years has been like that. It's an extraordinary story. My 60-day hunger strike in Rome in 2016, the one in 2014, which lasted 46 days, was like that. I went, with $25 in my pocket, and somehow the means materialized, at the last minute. I was able to complete, the impossible task, mission impossible. Every time has been a mission impossible, and the mission impossible has become every time possible somehow. It is truly reality is stranger than fiction, and my case is a perfect case for this. Yeah.
Well, we really commend you for not only the breakthrough analysis that you have brought to us today, but also your steadfast courage in carrying forth this mission to the WHO and carrying the as you say, you're going there representing all of humanity.
Yes,
in
that is
the true sense.
It's not an exaggeration. And of course, I have very strong motivations because they separated me from my children as a way to punish me, and I have not seen my children in 5 years. I'm not even allowed to know if they're alive. I cannot communicate directly or indirectly. And I was separated without any legal grounds whatsoever. In fact, in blatant violation of any and all laws of rules of jurisprudence and due process. And that's how they try to destroy you, and they try to destroy me emotionally. So they destroyed me financially, but I didn't stop. They destroyed me legally, and I didn't stop. But they destroyed me, by kicking me out of my own home and confiscating all of my computers and destroying my credibility and so on. That didn't work because I am now the one with credibility, and they meaning the system and the world's governments have lost all credibility. but they are still keeping my children hostage. And I suspect they're keeping my children hostage as a safety, because they know that sooner or later I will be the one standing in judgment over them. And they want to make sure that they have a way of protecting themselves by reminding me that they have my children, they can do whatever they want with my children. So my children are with my wife, but they're not with me, so they don't have my protection, and I have not seen my children in 5 years. So this, you see, this system that shows you how dirty this system is willing to play, and it has played. And had it had the right still to assassinate in the name of the program and of keeping this secret, I would have been long dead. But it looks like they've lost, or they've abandoned the right to assassinate in the name of this program in the 1980s. And I think that happened as a measure to protect insiders, for insiders to protect themselves, so they don't end up killing each other. Which has happened throughout the years, because several heads of state have lost their lives as a result of the need to keep this secret and to keep the complicity in genocide secret for their own protection. All the secrets have fallen now, so they are now at our mercy. Not only are they at our mercy, they are at the mercy of the law, and the law is brutal. I am a very kind person. I can forget and forgive, but the law does not forget and does not forgive. Once the law is re-engaged, the law is going to come down very, very hard on these people, and I would not want to be in their shoes.
Indeed, indeed. Well, we really want to thank you for taking time out today. I know that you we have undergone several emergencies today, and you're in preparation for a very difficult trip. So thank you so much for taking this time out, and we wish you all the best on your trip, and we'll all be monitoring your journey and following it, and the force is with you, as they say.
Thank you, Alfred. I appreciate the fact that you gave me the chance to explain and to reach out to more people. This is very important. We have to grow in numbers. There's strength in numbers. Yes.
Excellent. Thank
We'll
you
talk
very
soon.
much. Very good.
Bye.
Bye-bye.